Oh, we're live. Kit normally gives me a countdown.
I'm alive.
I said, here we go.
I was waiting for the countdown. Anyway, welcome
Three,
to
two, one, go.
welcome to another episode of the Carolinas Weather Group. It is Wednesday, November the 4th. Hard to believe that we're in the month of November, rounding out the year of 2015, soon to be. So we have just went through the Halloween and the fall or October season. Normally when November rolls around, we start to think about winter weather and what the winter has in store for us. So tonight, that's what we are going to be discussing. We're going to be having Mr. Larry Cosgrove on. We had Larry on a couple of months ago talking about El Nino, and we asked him to come back on towards closer towards winter to kind of have him give us his idea of what's going to be happening throughout the south and southeast of the United States here for this upcoming winter. So we'll get to Larry in just a second. Before that, kind of do a couple of house cleaning rules. I'm off kilter now. Kit got me there. This is a live broadcast, so if you have any questions tonight, please feel free to send them to us via Twitter or Facebook. We also have a question and answer tab on the side of the YouTube clip that you're watching right now, so you can submit your questions that way. And if you're watching on a later day, the YouTube version, and you want to download the podcast, you can visit your favorite podcast store and get that episode. So that's it. This is a live broadcast, like I said. Please feel free to send those questions in. I know winter weather is a big topic for everyone in the Carolinas and throughout the country. So we expect this winter to be kind of interesting, so we'll dive into that here in just a little bit. But before we do that, I am going to let the panel introduce themselves. I will say this. It's been a cold, cloudy, and rainy day for western North Carolina. It's actually been that way for the past 5 or 6 days. I think the last time we saw full sunshine was back on Friday. So it's been cold here, 60 degrees, but about 70 miles to my west on the other side of the mountain is where Ricky Matthews is, and he saw a little bit of different weather over there, Ricky.
It was a beautiful day. We had temperatures in the upper 70s. We had blue skies, a few clouds around at times, but, you know, to the east in Boone, where we have one of our cameras, it looked pretty sucky, to be honest. But it was nice here. I had my windows down. I went outside and had lunch outside. Perfect day, Scotty. I don't know what you're talking about.
Did you guys break a record today? I mean, I know there was some records that were close up.
Not today. Area. Today was 81 as for our record. We hit 79.
Ah, man, so close, so close. So yeah, it's been warm over in eastern Tennessee, and just across the line it's been cold due to the Carolina wedge. It was a little bit warmer and maybe a few peaks of sunshine to our east where Kit is tonight. Kit?
Well, I've been inside all day, so I wouldn't know if there was sun or if there wasn't. But the times I did go outside, it was pretty cloudy outside. On my way in from Belmont to UNC Charlotte this morning, I actually ran through a pretty heavy downpour. I was getting my stuff together to head out of the house, and then I just hear an absolute downpour hit my house. I look on the radar, and there's a big orange core right where my house is, and that moves on out to the northeast. I get in my car, head up to 85, just past the airport, and I run into the same storm again. So that was interesting having to drive through that. But that was really the only rain that I've seen come through. It was early in the morning. Well, I say early. Early for me is like 10 o'clock. So it's been a little bit misty on and off for the rest of the day of the times that I have been outside. But the origin of all this cold air is up in the northeast in New Jersey, so I wonder how the weather's going on for Peter up there. Peter?
Well, I hate to be, a buster to you all, but it's been pretty nice up here the last few days. I'm happy you've been keeping that rain and clouds down there. Thank you. I appreciate it. But Philly hit 80 degrees today. We were off by 1 degree for the record of 81. But it's supposed to be in the 70s the rest of the week. It could have some rain tomorrow and Friday, but it's staying pretty warm up here, so I'm liking it. No thanks. I don't want the cold.
That's ridiculous. It's been in the 60s here, And we were hopeful that it was going to get a little bit sunny and warmer towards the end of the week, and now it looks like there's going to be more clouds sticking around and temperatures staying in the 60s. Then we thought we were going to see the sunshine next week, and now the new models are painting more clouds and rain for next week. So we just give up here in the Carolinas. I don't think we can buy an ounce of sunshine right now, so I guess we should be thankful, though, because I guess we need the rain. Where it was raining earlier today, I seen some more reporting of floods down in the Grand Strand area of South Carolina. I actually posted a video on our Carolinas Weather Group page from the town of Nichols, South Carolina. So, it continues to rain down there, and that kind of brings me into what we're talking about tonight. Is the winter weather setup and what winter has in store for us this upcoming winter. And tonight we have Larry Cosgrove on with us. Larry, like I said earlier, joined us for the El Nino talk just a couple of months ago, and Larry has been gracious enough to join us again tonight and to kind of give us his idea of what the weather's going to be like this upcoming winter. And Larry, you guys have seen a lot of rain too down there in the Houston area.
Yeah, we've had, as I told you before, privately, we've had 2 weekends where it's been an absolute drench. And in fact, when you look southeast of me, the Beaumont area and the east part of Houston, they are still having high water issues because it just rained and rained and rain didn't stop. It's almost comical because here in Hockley, which is about 45 miles northwest of Houston, it rained 2¼ inches. It filled my pool. It wasn't so bad, though. There was a big storm on the Saturday morning, but other than that, it wasn't anything really exceptional. But that line, once it got to Houston, got stuck there. It just kept pounding the I-10 corridor from downtown Houston on into Lake Charles, Louisiana. And it repeated the case for the past weekend, where just all kinds of rain. I received 11 inches of rain previous weekend. Again, that was the famous storm that wasn't, where the Hurricane Center insisted that Patricia did not regroup, it was not subtropical or anything. And here's this ice swirling around south of Galveston. But the whole issue here is that we've had a very active rainfall pattern in Texas, and soon we'll be spreading up in the Carolinas as well. But I want you guys to think about something. You may remember that last August, September, people kept saying, well, California is going to get floods, landslides. All the moisture is headed across Mexico into Texas and the Gulf Coast. It's bypassing California. And that's a very critical thing because if you look at satellite imagery from past 2 winters, it's the same thing. It bypassed California. That's why they're dry now. And yeah, when they get it up for air disturbance, or like they've been getting, you'll see occasional cases for showers and storms. But again, it's not the big womp type of storm like it was in 82, 83, and 97, 98. It's very much like 2009-10. It's not saying that that's a excellent match analog, because revision said that 2009-10 was a moderate El Nino. But you know what? It's one of those I find which has some links in terms of snow cover, in terms of precipitation pattern, and also to some degree the upper air pattern. Again, it's not a perfect match. Just to go through the process of what I did, and again, I don't want this to be construed as long-winded, but forecasting for a season typically is long-winded. I started on I look for precipitation matches for the summer. It's always a good thing because you can kind of tell where there's a pattern going from summer to fall to winter. And I found out that the best match was 1896. We do have records for that date. But there's a problem, though. 1896 doesn't have upper air data. We didn't have satellites then. We don't have reliable oceanic data. So I had to think of a substitute for 1896 in terms of precipitation. And guess what? It was 1993. And we were having a discussion here about the NAO match. Jim Keller at Wakefield in Virginia office, National Weather Service, had 1993 as a very good match with the current year. And I think that's a very, very big deal because it kind of gets your mind setting, okay, how is this going to play out? Is it going to be like a warm and east winter? You know, like those folks that are always going bearish, oh, don't worry, every month will be mild, we'll get no snow. You can hear all the time. And then, of course, you get the gang of Frigidaires, I call them, where they're always going for all kinds of cold and stuff. And, of course, it never quite works out that way. So I follow along on this list. I established 1896 as a match for precipitation. I put it in a general mix of 20, substitute 1993. Then I look for the sunspot. I want to see, because we've had a fairly low energy sunspot cycle, 24. Had a great match back in, what would be, here my mind is skipping here, but yeah, 1957-58 was a good precipitation match, simply because I wanted to introduce something that had a high PDO rate, okay, very warm water across the Pacific Ocean, northern Pacific all the way up to the Bering Strait, and I wanted to see how that matched with the El Nino, because 57-58 had a strong El Nino. It also was forecast and did drop off fairly early, and we may be seeing that now. So you move on, you get all these dates. If you look at my page on Google Groups, you'll see I've got all the entries and the alternatives. 57-58 was used once by itself, but also as an alternative because I had nothing, of course, of a precipitation nature and a temperature forecast at all levels for 1927-28. Okay? I found out that it turned up 3 times. Also for the hurricane, tropical cyclone deck across the northern hemisphere. 2006 was viable because it had a steep drop-off after it was predicted to be this Gonzo El Nino, which never happened. This El Nino is strong, but it's not 97-98. Just to be sure, I used 97-98 twice as an analog for tropical cyclones and also as an apparent global sea surface temperature anomaly. Now, when you use other analogs like 65, 66, strong El Nino, like get a drop-off indicated there, 72, 73 was a good match for the pattern we're forecast to have with the current El Nino. And I bring this up because, you know what? You're all too young to understand why this drives fear in the heart of weather enthusiasts for winter. 72 to 73. I had just graduated from high school. I was going to Montgomery County Community College in Pennsylvania. New Year's Eve in Philadelphia, 76 degrees, heavy rain, and thunderstorms. It never snowed that winter. And many people said, well, if you throw it in there, it's going to ruin the forecast. Actually, it didn't. Because if you look west of the Appalachians, very cold winter, very snowy too. The trough axis was between the Rockies and the Appalachians. You had all kinds of cold in Chicago, even had ice storms in Texas and Mississippi. Had a big ice storm in Houston, snow too. But again, it's one vestige there. 1977 was an analog because, like this year, it had a dead zone after no tropical cyclones anywhere in September 9th or 12th of 77. It was a quieter year than what we had. But still, that tells me there's a pattern there I'm looking for. 87, 88, strong El Nino, fall off to, use that as an analog. We talked about 93, 94, also 2006, and there are two more to look at. 2013 had a very decent match for summer and fall upper air pattern. And then 2014, strong PDO, strongest ever. Good match overall in the oceans, and had a good upper air match as well during the summer and fall. So you put all these together. I like to call it a wearing blender technique. And you draw, and this is what I used in my forecast you see in the Google group. I plot the upper air, temperature, and the forecast for precipitation, and then you end it with some special areas like snow cover, what the jet stream should look like, and finally the summary for temperature and precip. Here's what I figured out. November could have a cold spot or two in it, which would drag the temperature down most parts of the West. It looks very mild now, but I have a hunch that's going to change. I'm not saying it's going to be like last November, but it may have its moments which really can't tell right now. But December and early January are going to disappoint. I'm thinking it's going to be warm. I think every snow lover in the East Coast and the Carolinas are going to say, there's no way we'll have winter, let's wait till next year. But I think that pattern is going to break for the the last two-thirds, most of Feb, first two-thirds of March, and then it goes away. So that in summation is, it's not a bad winter forecast if you want golden snow, but it's going to have its disappointments. And I think for people that want winter for the holidays, ain't going to happen. Something has to happen really fast for things to change. Questions? Comments? Insults?
No, I listening to you, maybe we can kind of dissect the temperatures, precip type, and things like that. The past couple of winters, we've seen the intrusion of the polar vortex, or intrusion of cold air coming into the United States. What do you see with that this year? There's been some people saying it's not going to be as cold, and then we've seen some people say, well, it is going to be that cold. We're going to see that. So after the studying that you've looked at and the research, what do you think with that? Do you think it's going to be some insurgence of cold air, or do you think we're going to be a little bit milder this year temperature-wise?
Here's where I think it's going to fall. Honestly, I think if you drew an average between 13-14 and 14-15, that may be fairly close. But one thing I'm noticing is that when it does get cold, about 10 weeks long. I think, as I said, if you look at North Carolina, people will be shaking their fists at rain, mild temperatures, and saying, where's winter? I don't think they're going to see much really before Jan 7 to 10. But then after that, evenly in Appalachia, that might do the trick. But my thinking is that this is going to be pretty chaotic. I'm more and more liking 2 years, actually 3 years. 1957-58. Now remember, I was around then. I was only 3 years old, but the point being was that I was around, and I do remember it. It was so mild that December in Philadelphia. It was like, this can't be Christmas. But then, right after New Year's, we had heavy-duty snow, we had bitter cold. It was cold practically everywhere, at least the Rockies, and it didn't improve till March. That, with its PDO characteristic, that warm water all the way up the west coast into the Bering Strait, and it's strong El Nino, may actually be a pretty good. I only used it once. Still, it looks to me like a decent match. 93, 94 for its volatility. That had some excellent cold. I mean, it had below zero cold in spots. But it would warm up, everything would melt, and then it would crash again. And you may remember that. I don't know, I guess you'd be too young for that, too. North Carolina all the way up the coast. Lots of ice. It rained basically east of 95. The Appalachian line, the Blue Ridge, ice. Lots of ice. I think the other one, in terms of tentative weather, I like 2009-10, though I don't think the weather we saw that December will be useful in this analog. Because frankly, I don't think it'll get cold at all until we get past the New Year. So there's three to play around with. But again, 14-15 may be different in the sense that you recall all the really hardcore snow was up north in New England. I think you've got a shot at having like a one storm where it's all rain and another where it's all snow. But I think there's some erratic behavior you're going to be dealing with, this winter.
That's a good point that you bring that up. I remember vividly the 2009-2010 winter. We had Christmas here. It was a lot of snow. So what you're saying is it seems to be a little bit warmer for December-wise, which brings me to this question, kind of going off my notes here of questions I had to ask you. You're talking about a warmer early winter season, late fall. What do you think of severe weather-wise? Do you think we could see some severe weather in November, early December? Because in the past, we've seen some episodes like that here in the Southeast.
You might need to unmute your mic. There's a little bit of feedback.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. All right. Okay. The deal with this is that I think you have a shot at that in November. But I can't see it in terms of the models over the next 2 weeks. The European model had a really good juicy storm coming up the coastal plain in the 11 to 15. So that might be something there. But again, it's not something I saw that jumped out at me. I would say at this point, if I had to look for really, call it what you will, that you may go from being a dry regimen to one that's overly wet. That would be my concern in November and December. Because even in December, there was a good storm in there. It's just that there was no cold air supply for it. I think your main worry, seriously though, this winter will be chances for heavy rain and maybe a surprise ice or snow event that's noteworthy. And I'd probably, if I had to put money on it, which I wouldn't do, it would be somewhere first week of February.
That kind of brings me to my next series of questions. As we talk about, you're saying that the first part's going to be a little bit warmer, and then as we go into late winter, we're going to see that cold air intrusion. And that brings up precip types. So we've had a dry summer, like we talked about earlier before the show, and now we've entered this wet period. You just brought up possibly some flooding issues. So let's talk first about the heavy rain threat, and then let's talk about the ice threat, which in my mind of forecasting and what I've been telling our viewing area forecast, I believe that we are due here in the Carolinas to see a big ice storm. We've not had one for many years, 5 or 6 at least, that I can think of. So let's talk about first the heavy rain threat and then the potential of some ice storms.
Okay, first of all, I want to clear up with, when you have a big ice storm in the Carolinas, you typically have a wedge for cold air damming. And it brings to mind that back in the late 90s, I think it was, I don't know if any of you know Greg Fischel, the WRAL.
Yes.
Greg's an old friend of mine. Greg and I worked together 30 at Chicago. And I remember that shut down TV stations all the way from South Carolina up into Virginia because it brought their towers down. And it brought WRLs down they were out of business, I think, for about a month. They had to go to an alternate source. You need to get a wedge to get a really good ice storm in the Carolinas. Some people will bring up stuff that happened, I don't know, like in 2003 for that winter. And yeah, there was an ice storm there, but it was all like in the interior, like way up in the Piedmont and back in the mountains. The kind of ice storm that brings down the Carolinas and Virginia. You get a cold bank of air, low pressure has to develop along the coast, not too far out, because if it's too far out to sea, you maintain a cold enough profile where it either doesn't do anything at all or it's snow. Now you have to get the low forming close to the coast and getting some warm air jump overrun the wedge. Could that happen this winter? Scotty, I think you may be on to something. I really do. I wouldn't put money on it, to use my famous quote, but it's like I have to say that somewhere in the mix, in that mid-January to mid-March option, there's going to be an ice event. And if I had using the 93 analog, where there's redevelopment and the cold air stayed enough where you had glaze and not snow, I'd have to say that like basically anybody like South Hill, Henderson, Raleigh, Durham, down to Fayetteville, they'd have issues with ice in this scenario. Probably not the eastern counties, like New Bern or whatnot, but when you look at ice events in North Carolina, the ones that really mean something, it's always in the Research Triangle down to like, and to some extent like Charlotte and down to Greenville and Spartanburg. That's kind of where I'm thinking with this mentally if we do get that track development. Will we get a good heavy snow event? There, the 57-58 analog is probably your best bet. Because when you look at that, where you had that really balmy December and people had written off winter, all of a sudden it would hit them in the face. There was another storm a year later. I want to say it came out of Atlanta. It snowed and ice down there and came up the pike. Those are the analogs you got to watch because that would mean you'd get a very with an existing cold deck and high pressure that was like over Quebec and didn't budge. You had a similar scenario in 95, 96. Those are the scenarios you worry about. I do want to mention, though, since 72, 73 is in that mix twice, remember that season had a horde of nor'easters, but it was warm and rainy the entire time. Never got cold. Even the big cities up north. New York, I think LaGuardia had an inch of snow. Philly had a trace. DC had a half an inch. But you get the picture. Is that 72-73 analog is not your friend if you want snow. It's in the mix. It enhances the storm track, so to speak. But it tells me that if you have, in an ideal case, 3 months where there's a winter storm, Jan, Feb, and March, one's going to be ice, one's going to be heavy snow, one's going to be, sorry gang, all rain. And if I had to pick the one that's going to be all rain, it would be March. So the way it's stacking up, ice chances Jan, snow in Feb, probably mainly a rain event in March. We're going to a neutral and a La Nina type of scenario it warms up like crazy that spring.
Well, as you're talking about snow, as you're talking about snow, we had a viewer question, and I'm going to read it off. This is from Lynn Moore.
Sure.
She says, Larry, you keep referring to the winter of 93, 94. We had one of our biggest snowstorms in 93, which was the blizzard or superstorm of 93. Do you see, what are the odds of us seeing another big storm like that?
Okay, hold on a second. The superstorm was the winter of 92, 93. It occurred March 13, 93. The 93, 94 winter, which was bad, was erratic. And the storms they had in that winter were more or less ice-based along the 95 corridor. Could we get a 92, 93? It was an El Nino, albeit like a weak one. I'm not going in that direction, though, you know, something could happen along those lines. The breakdown I have in Google Groups, I have a map in the summary, and it shows possible jet stream configurations in the warm period for the cold. The cold period has this deep upper low, like in the Great Lakes, into the Ohio Valley. If you were to get a superstorm of some kind with that, that probably would be a rain ending in snow in the Carolinas. Again, I leave the door open. There are some things I think you understand that it's unwise to stick your neck out so far and try and say, well, I think we'll have heavy snow in January in the Carolinas. You know, it might happen. It's a possible scenario I'm toying with. But I would say to you, the people that are going to be the forecasters of the future, don't go think of scenarios and think what might happen and line the ducks up like that. I was saying, if I had a bet on ice, Jen, I had a bet on snow, Feb, I had a bet on rain, March. That's as far as I'll go.
I like that. I've wrote your stuff down word for word here, so I like that breakdown. That's interesting. Kit, did you have a question or anything?
Was just sort of thinking, it wasn't necessarily one of those going to vocalize, but since you're trying, I was sort of thinking back to my biggest snowstorm or winter storm event of the December 2002 ice storm, and it might be like some of the other ones I'm talking about, but that one I was trying to find a good synoptic setup of it, and it looked like basically it started out as a low pressure system over the south central plains, and then it moved east. It moved towards the east, towards like Atlanta, which is where I've always heard if Atlanta gets winter weather, we'll get the same. And it moved right over Atlanta, or the center of the low did, and just had the very top of that precipitation over the Carolinas and brought what I remember to be an inch of ice, but it might have been a little bit less. Is that the type of setup that you're thinking is going to bring our ice storms this year?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that the Atlanta reference is true. Typically, if you're going to get a good sock ice storm in the 95 portion of the Carolinas, and to some extent the 40 and 85 corridors as well, you want to get a low pressure area that hugs the Gulf Coast, right? Cuts across the neck of Florida, stays close to the coastline. Again, if you get temperature profiles are so cold, it can only be snow. You want to keep that low close to the coast. That way, the rain to ice to snow transition will set up very close to Raleigh and Charlotte and even to some extent Columbia. It gets inland, you rain. But Atlanta's a good measure. And I would say this is that when you're looking for forecast chances this coming winter, a good benchmark Look at your rain and ice and snow across the south. If you go I-10 and from ice to snow at I-20 in the deep south, it's your baby for the Carolinas. Because you know what's going to do? It's going to turn 85 will be your boundary for snow, and then 95 likely will be your boundary for rain to ice. And you'll get a good solid coating of ice all the way, like you say, using South Hill and Henderson down to Fayetteville. But those to me, I was doing this years ago. It was like when I was like even a high school student, even beyond that, in grade school, I would see storms that would come up the coast. And usually if it's an ice storm in the Carolinas, it'll be an ice storm even to some extent in the mid-Atlantic. But the snow will eventually creep in there. Because typically what happens is as you gain in latitude of the storm, the cold air deck gets a little bit more entrenched and hard to break. But for your case again, look at I-20, look at I-10. If the ice is between the two, it's coming to see you.
And I live right on the I-85 corridor. Like my house is 5 miles south of I-85, and the university area is probably about 2 miles south of it. So it'll be tough for us to figure out whether we're going to get.
It's an interesting place to be if you think about it, because if you look at the Carolinas, the people that live, let's say, down closer to the ocean, it's very low elevation, that cold dome in there if you get a wedge. But the further back you get, like into the Piedmont, and close to the rim of the mountains, like toward Mount Pisgah, you're set beautifully. Because, yeah, the warm air can jump over a certain amount, but you'll never fully change over. And the worst you're going to get is a glazing, freezing rain. You'll have that chance, I think, this winter. But again, I caution is that don't put much stock in any forecast before Jan 10. I just, when I look at the analogs, I started doing an analog setup like in the summer because gas traders want to know. And it was weird, it kept coming out the same way. I don't mind November warm forecast, really, because there was pollution from 2014-15 with the typhoon injection stuff, but there were other cold Novembers in there as well, and they mainly had to do with southern track storms. And that's why if you think, well, we might have some cold, chilly, call it what you will, drizzly, rainy nights, I don't think it's going to mean much because you won't have cold air and keep it there. But I think that's going to happen to you by mid-January.
All right, well, sounds optimistic. But I have a couple friends.
Optimistic.
Yeah. I have
spoken like a true winter storm lover,
Oh yeah, that's very true. I've got a couple friends who really enjoy skiing, and my grandparents live right near the ski slopes. So just sort of looking up towards the mountains, like we might get ice, but up in the mountains they might get snow. How optimistic, to use that word again, would you say the skiers should be for this season?
I think they'll be fine. I have the cautions here, though, and that is that I mentioned the three scenarios, like Jan, Feb, and March, like each would have a big storm. One might be ice, one might be snow, and so on. They may have all snow for what we know, but maintenance of cold air may chase away their spring season. Because I can see it all being chased out quickly. And like when we hit the solstice, the equinox, I should know that by now. We go around March 2021. I think it'll be leaving in a hurry then, and I'm not sure it won't be anything more than soggy, wet snow, dirty snow by that point. But I think they're going to have a decent season, albeit truncated because of a warm start and a warm finish, if that makes any sense.
It does. And Larry, I want to kind of jump onto that point.
Interject something. Let me interject something here. You as meteorology students can figure this out. You all use the ESRL website, right?
Once or twice, yeah.
Yeah. I want you all to use that routinely. There's a reason for it. If you go to my Google Groups page, where I outline the years, the analogs, what you can do is plot like 500 millibar precipitation, like for single days. And you'd be surprised how good that can be. It'll give you insights into what could happen. What I caution is that because temperatures tend to be warmer than what they were, in the 50s, you always want to do some modification by yourself over what the analog plots out. But learn to use that, because that can tell you what your best gambling odds are, so to speak, on types of storms, upper air systems, and temperature pools. It's really a very good thing to use, because if you're confronted with a very warm model run, like we've had recently, you'll want to plot an alternative. And analog sets are great for that. They really are. So get to use them. What I do is that I use a 160 meter spectrum for 500 millibar departures for the anomaly. That is, you have 80 meters off, 80 meters above, and that way I can tell where the ridging or the troughing is going to be. But I really would like you guys to use that, because when you get done with your school, you're going to be fighting in the real world for positions, for jobs. And that's something most college students have no blithering idea about. If you look at all the forecasts that are going online right now, most of them, be sure, deal with indices and El Nino. And that's it. ESRL gives you a great opportunity to see what else is out there. Because you get a temperature and precip record that goes back to 1895 in an upper area. Can't be beat.
Larry, Kit was talking about the skiing conditions. One thing that I have a question about is a lot of our mountain communities in the Carolinas and Tennessee, where Ricky's at in Virginia, places like that, they see a lot of northwest flow snow. With this active southern jet stream, do you think that we're going to see a little less northwest flow this winter? Because I know that really helps the ski slopes out up there. What is your thoughts on that?
Right. They're going to have their chances for that, but you're right, because if you have storms that take a more inland track, when they get out of town, the chances are that the northwest flow is in a stable scenario, because the trough axis is long gone. You need to get the upper trough and upper low in there with a surface northwest wind to make sure the snow squalls linger and actually build on the west and central areas of Appalachia. So I don't think it's a total loss, but there will be enough areas in there where it cuts back on opportunities to get snow squalls that have their origins using lake moisture. So it's kind of a split proposition. It's not as bad as it would be if you had a strict El Nino typical split flow, because there, excuse my French, you're screwed. Because the cold air is way, way up north. You don't get any influx off the lakes. You are drawing off warm and often snow-free land, and the lakes by that point, because again the cold air is staying north, they're basically, they're warm too, as warm as in the summer and fall. But you don't want a typical El Nino if you want to get northwest induced snow squalls in the mountains. I don't think you're going to get that. There'll be enough hand storms where it gets there. Sorry, there's no cyclonic energy. It all went up to New England.
I guess it would help if I would unmute my microphone. Thanks for that, Larry. I think Peter said he had a question here on our little side chat here.
Yeah, I got two questions for you, Larry. I want to know what you think about the potential for nor'easters up here in Philly, and also if the ocean temperature will affect the rain and snow line over here, because usually we get storms that cause a lot of rain or ice for South Jersey, and north and west gets all snow. So what's your opinion on that?
Right. Again, if we use that 93-94 analog and the 57-58 and the 2009-10, I think your odds this winter on getting one or two real whopper storms are decent. I don't worry so much about the water temperature now because that will change in time. You recall that there's a huge cold pod up by the Grand Banks and Fisher Cap, but down by the New Jersey coast, it's pretty warm. That's got to chill down, and it may chill down. Remember that if you get any kind of a coastal storm, you're going to get upwelling and then downwelling, and it flattens out the water temperature. You'll see it drop back a bit as you go from now to, let's say, the week or two before Christmas. I don't think water temperature is your enemy here. My concern is that you get a 70 scenario to start the pattern. So in essence, that let's say you get a storm in December, gonna be all rain. January, it may be one of these deals where it's rain ending in snow, but that's usually, as you know, useless to Jersey because, yeah, it coats the ground, big whoop-de-doo. I know when I lived in Jersey and Pennsylvania, I wanted those suckers to slow down, develop a secondary, and then bank a north wind while we maintain a moist profile. Because that usually means in Gloucester County, you get 2 to 4, maybe if you get a home run, about 6 or 7. You'll get that, but you're only going to get it after we get past the new year. I'm pretty sure with this El Nino setup here, the way I'm looking at it, it's not going to be your mother's El Nino. It's going to have lots of coastal storms. They'll be strong. They'll be cold. Eventually, you'll see banking from a negative NAO and a negative AO to help you out. But you just start to weaken, which I think it's actually going to peak already. I think you'll see it flatline a while, then, nose down. But you're going to have to wait till the second half of winter for the fun. I think you'll catch magic probably twice. I can't say it'll be ice or it'll be all snow, but I think you'll get at least 2 in there that at least are in the alleyway and people say, hey, I remember that storm. Okay.
Very, very interesting. I have another viewer question. This from Michael Moss. He said, Larry, it seems that the PDO index. He said the PDO index and temps are generally on the increase. What are the effects of this over the winter, and do you expect to see this continue? This trend to continue?
Okay. First thing about the PDO for a long time now. This is the 3rd year. That concerns me because it's not normal to maintain a high profile plus PDO for this long. So my thinking is at some point, probably later, not altogether like soon, it's going to start to ease and break down. But we're not there yet. It has been rebuilding. And since it is so strong, you have to play a mental mind game here, okay? You got lots of warm water, eastern half of the Pacific, all the way from the Arctic Circle down to strip, it's telling you that there'll probably be EPO and PNA ridging along the west coast, either inland or offshore. And if that's the case, and it emerges in a blocking scenario, we know also that we had a very strong, vivid negative AO and negative NAO at some points during the summer, right? When you have that type of signature, it likes to reoccur at some point in the winter. So consider this, that strong plus PDO is likely to induce more ridging, more cold, but it's got to get that one thorn in its side, the El Nino, to calm down a little bit and to work with it. This is the mistake I think a lot of forecasts made. You may recall the Godzilla versus the blob argument, which really, it's kind of sounds grade schoolish, but okay, you use that. What if they worked in concert and not against each other? If the El Nino weakens and the PDO is starting to crest again, I would tend to think it's going to mean trough right in the middle of the continent. Cold air drainage all the way into Mexico. They're going to boundary setting up, love it, along the Atlantic shoreline. That means Mike, where he's in Indiana, is going to have plenty of cold, some decent lake snow bursts to deal with, but he'd be hard-pressed to see a really true whopper storm. Yeah, there might be one in there. You know, if you recall what happened in 2009-10, there was one surprise that got the Midwest. Everybody and his uncle kept saying, oh, no, it'll go to the east like all the rest. But no, it didn't. It stayed back. Same thing happened in 2013-14. You might get lucky with one, Mike. But my thinking is that you'll get the cold more than you'll get the snow. But as opposed to what happens in the Carolinas like we're talking about, you'll have less chance for ice, and most of what you get frozen. Fair enough?
I think that's fair enough, and he also wanted to add that it's been 75 to 80 degrees there as well, so he's enjoying the warm air.
He had to remind us because I'm sure it's bothersome for a lot of us that want to get into winter. But I told him, I said, look, you might get a couple of cold shots in November, but it's not going to be like it was a year ago. No, you're going to have to wait, and that's the whole thing. Waiting for the impatient is like a death sentence, you know? Because how do they know? Think about it. How do they know what it's going to turn out like? If in December it was warm all month long, and even like to start the new year, it's warm. You have to have faith in this, that it works. It's worked the past 2 years, and I thought very well. And I think it'll work this year, but it's going to be hitting you in the face with an extreme you won't like, because you may be going from a scenario where it's in the 60s and 70s a lot through December, and even like New Year's Day. And then the guillotine drops. And then you're going to have fun.
Well, I think we're running close to the end of the show. Guys, do you guys have any other questions for Larry as we kind of wrap up? All right, they're all quiet. So.
Sorry, my microphone.
No, I'm wondering.
Larry, we did a poll today at my station having everyone take a guess as to when the first 1-inch snow would be at the Tri-Cities Airport. And our fearless leader, Dave, said the 17th of December. So if he's wrong, we're going to have to come back.
Yeah, I can't. I'd be hard pressed to endorse that because, again, from what I've seen, we're going to have to wait. And a lot of this ties to if El Nino starts to weaken, but I would warn you that it's not going to weaken like overnight. The 2006 example, 6-7, it died suddenly. I remember there was a student at Millersville State in PA that caught that and predicted the change back to really cold. And it won't be like that. It's going to be an aggravation because it's got to hit a certain threshold where the central portions of the Nino districts are still pretty warm, but the eastern sectors are cooling off. That, in essence, would mean that we might get a good Gulf of Mexico cold storm. Now, that would be boss because that would mean everybody down south and in the East Coast would get clocked with a good winter storm. Here's hoping that happens.
Hey, we love those Gulf Coast storms in the wintertime.
Yes, sir. Now, Scotty,
Now, I remember the 93 storm. March 93 was good.
Yeah, we did a show about that. I think it was earlier this year. I don't remember much from it, but I remember hearing stories from my parents just saying 20 to 25 inches of snow. You know, everything was just shut down for about a week or so. I wish we
Yeah,
could
it was
get,
fun because I was in Ohio that great because we had 11.5 inches of snow in Cleveland. The lake helped out, but Youngstown got clocked with like 28. Pittsburgh, some of the suburbs got 40 inches of snow, and the downtown got 28. And I remember, like, the wind was amazing with that. Even in Cleveland, we were far from the storm core, which of course was like right along the shoreline, but they were 75 mile per hour steady winds in New Jersey from that, and you'd be hard pressed to beat that ever. But I'm confident that, you know, in the Carolinas, they're going to get a good storm like, you know, I wouldn't say like that, but maybe something of the order of like 78 storm or the 3. Something fun could happen that year, you know? And I think it could get to you guys, but it's going to be in a winter sandwich with when is this damn warm weather going to stop? You know? It'll happen, just give it time.
That's it. Well, Kit, go ahead. I think you were wanting to add something.
Yeah, I just had sort of one final question. We've gone through March with like all of the winter weather being factored in. When do you see our first major severe weather outbreak coming in the spring?
Okay, I will use an example of he likes to put me on the spot here. But if you remember 82, 83, do you remember reading about that? That had a hell of an El Nino that year. But do you remember what happened in March of 83? Did you ever read about that?
I don't believe we have. I definitely will after this, though.
Well, I'm going to inform you. There was a humongous storm, March of 83. Had Columbia Gulf has, could be wrong, but the point was there's a chance when you emerge from an El Nino that maybe like late March, April, I would say if I had to put my finger on it, I think your best choice would be first or second week of April 2016. I'll stick my neck out here in the chopping block. That's the bet I would take.
Right, just putting you on the spot there, just to see what you think about the severe weather.
It should be good. Again, you look at El Nino climate severe weather things, like 97, 98, it was great in the South because, like, that spring, it just had I don't like saying it's great. Do I think you're going to get that? That might be pushing it, but I think you're going to get a good severe weather event at some point in the South in April that's going to channel up into the Carolinas.
You know, we were talking about ice storms and how we've had a drought in ice storms per se. We've also had a drought in severe weather here, widespread severe weather. I think probably 2010, 2011, when Tuscaloosa happened, was my thoughts. That's the last severe weather outbreak that I can think of that we've had here in the Southeast. So we'll finish with that. Larry, kind of close us out. Give us your hot spots again, kind of just in general what you think is going to happen, and then maybe tell us how we can get a hold of you via social media or email or whatever you want to share to our followers.
Okay. The best way is just to email me at gmail.com. I'm on Facebook. And my page. There's many ways of getting to me because typically an email is the best way. That's what I'm thinking is like if you have a question, again, what I'm always pushing about these things is that when you're making a forecast for the winter and a season in general, make sure you use every resource available. Don't fall into the, well, it will stand you in good stead because you'll get something which will be useful. You know, using it if you blend out Larry.Cosgrove at gmail.com. That's the best way. Okay.
All right, Larry. Well, we appreciate you coming on tonight, and maybe we can have you back on towards the beginning of next year and kind of assess what's been going on and maybe what to expect for the rest of the winter.
Here's hoping for a stormy winter and an even stormier spring.
There we go. There we go. Thank you so much, Larry, for coming on tonight.
Okay, guys.
All right, guys. Well, that was
have a good night now.
That was Larry. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too, sir. Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, that was Larry. We appreciate him coming on tonight, and it looks like it's going to be warm for the first part of the winter time, and then after the beginning of next year, and Larry's forecasting and everything he's looks like that's when the the bottom's going to drop out. So we'll see how that works out. I know here in the North Carolina area, November does look to be pretty warm for the first few weeks, and then maybe another cold shot come in towards the middle to end of the month. So I hope you guys learned something tonight and kind of took some notes. I know I did, so we'll revisit those throughout the winter time and see how accurate they become. And next week we'll talk about the Mesonet program out in Kansas and Oklahoma, and then after that we're going to be talking to representatives from CASA about the radar programs that have taken off, speaking of severe weather, taken off in Dallas, Texas, and we're going to talk about how that program works and maybe how we can incorporate that into the Charlotte area as they're looking for some radar coverage down there. So guys,
yeah, it'll definitely be interesting hearing about the CASA radar network when that how that is working for them, and maybe if we should maybe have Charlotte and the Triad area be a second test area for that, since we're trying to get our new radar system up here.
I think it would be a great idea. I hope to have some of our meteorologist friends on from the Charlotte area during that show. So maybe we can be a grassroots and start something for our area with that. So you guys have anything to add before we get off of here?
Nope.
Pray for
Absolutely not.
And thanks for those who were bearing with us during the audio issues with Larry. I think they cut out towards the middle of the show. I think it was a good feed, and then towards the end it kind of got scattered again. So we will try to work on that the next time that he comes on.
And just to re-emphasize like what his email is, if anyone does want to have that, it is just larry.cosgrove@gmail.com. That's what he was saying was the best way to get in contact with him. He's also on Facebook, Larry Cosgrove again.
Yep, and you can follow him on Twitter as well. So, yes, I just had reading another comment. It got choppy again at the end. So we're sorry about that. We'll try to get that worked out the next time we have Larry on. So we'll sign off for now. And I know it's been a kind of a hectic show, so hope you enjoyed something. If you have a question or you want to kind of reiterate or have something come up that you want to ask us, we can definitely send that to Larry, or you can do it yourself. And we look forward to hopefully what's going to be an active wintertime. So for everyone at the Carolinas Weather Group, I am Scotty Val, and we'll see you next week.
Adios, Pacos.